The Leopold Tenants Association was formed in 1971. It was formed as a response to the growing disillusionment from tenants about the quality of the housing that was built in the 1960s, and also because of the growing isolation that those housing were being formed. That was the growing isolation that was a result of those homes. The Leopold estate was built between 1968 and 1976, replacing traditional London terrace homes that were severely bombed during the Second World War. Up to 2/3 of the Leopold area was bombed during the Second World War because of the proximity to the London docks, and also because the remaining homes were, by 1960s, considered slums. You read some of the housing reports from the London County Council of the time. It shows some of the quite shocking state some of those homes were in, and of course none of them had inside toilets or other essential amenities like bathrooms. The first homes were what we used to call the grey blocks, and they were very, very quickly built. Within 18 months they were built, and from day one there were problems. The Leopold Tenants Association was essentially a community organisation. It held events initially in people's homes and also in local pubs, the Cotton Arms and the Galloway. And then in 1976, with the second wave of housing in the Leopold area, they got their own tenant hall. And that allowed them to organise their own events, and the first big event they held was for the Queen's Silver Jubilee in 1977, which I am proud to say I was actually an attendee. And they also held a community bar that people joined for a minimal entrance fee, and the cost of beers in there and were considerably below pub prices. And it was open a few nights a week and held regular events like discos and bands at the weekends. Also, the campaigning element was not forgotten. They held regular meetings with the Greater London Council and the other interested parties. The right to buy was the first big change and challenge for the association. It's worth bearing in mind that in 1976 everyone was largely the same. They were all local authority tenants, everyone had the same tenants agreement, and everyone was largely the same. Right to buy started to change all that. People bought their own homes, so their priorities were starting to change. Also, but there were now leaseholders, they started to sell their homes. So we had the second generation of residents who are the private landlords, private or private tenants. And their priorities, as I say, greatly change. Also, with the abolition of the GLC, the landlord changed. It was now Tower Hamlet Council, and they had a slightly different attitude towards Tenants Association. They actually encouraged them greatly more. They gave a grant, which I don't recall the GLC ever done, to all things like newsletters and things like that. But it became increasingly the case that to make the change you had to be political. And that was something that quite rightly Leopold Tenants Association, and indeed most tenants associations, never were. The 1990s onwards were very challenging times for all tenants associations, but particularly the Leopold one. The demographic of the area was changing totally. People's idea of social life was changing totally. This means that the community bar was becoming less and less popular. The amount of influence the Tenants Association was having was also decreasing. It felt very much as though it was just going through the routines, holding meetings, but actually not a lot was changing. In fact, very, very little was changing. The Leopold estate, like all housing estates, were going through the first wave of what we now call antisocial behaviour. Then we call vandalism and hooliganism, but damage was being caused by local residents who basically weren't caring or didn't have the same values of what other people did. That's not to say that the Tenants Association in the 1990s and early 2000s didn't have tremendous successes. Community was still working to a limited extent. I think the celebrations on the Leopold estate about the millennium were some of the best we've ever held. Also, we held some very, very invigorating meetings with people like the Director of Housing at Tower Hamlets, who made some very sudden promises, which we publicised, but ultimately didn't come true, but she made the promises. Things changed in 2001. In 2001, there was an incident whereby a balcony fell off one of the grey blocks. When the balcony actually fell from the top floor right to the bottom. Fortunately, no one was on the balcony and no one was underneath it at the time, otherwise it could have been an even greater tragedy. But it made residents realise that the status quo could not be allowed to continue. If you wanted action, it had to be through total change. It couldn't just be achieved just by sitting around a table discussing with council officers and council members. Fortunately, national and local government had already come to that conclusion. In 1998, Tower Hamlets Council realised that they would never have the sufficient money to refurbish all of their estates, so they formed organisations like Tower Hamlets Community Housing and Popular Harker, which were not part of the local authority, so were not bound by so much by local authority rules about funding and the like. The Tenants Association in 1998 briefly discussed this problem, and quite rightly in my opinion at the time come to the conclusion that we were proud council residents and we wanted to stay council residents. 2001 changed all that. Residents realised that that could not continue if we wanted change. At the time, sadly, it was also becoming more and more clear that the Tenants Association bar, which as I say had been going on since 1976, was no longer a viable business concern. There were some nights when there were more people behind the bar than what there was in front of the bar. So sadly in 2002 the bar closed. The Leopold Tenants Association was no longer the right vehicle to take forward the concerns of the local residents and the local area. A purely resident-only group wouldn't work. A partnership organisation had to be formed. So that is why in 2003 the Leopold Area Regeneration Team was formed, which would aim to act as a partnership between residents and local groups.